And we're back with Course 2, Lecture 2, Sublecture 12, Part 2, because the recorder decided to stop working in the middle of a sentence, but I didn't want to lose that information, so we're just going to keep going. The telephone number might belong to the executive director in a very small company. It frankly doesn't matter. We just want to make sure we get the right one, and it's usually a question back to whoever you're working with as to who do you want the government to call if there's an issue. If it's not the person whose name is elsewhere on the paperwork, you may want to put the person's name they would be calling in parentheses. Let's keep going. This up here, this is Section A. The form, the 1449 is also called Section A. Other things you would fill in on this page would be the signator of the offerer. That typically is going to be only one person in a company is going to be qualified to bind a contract, and that typically is going to be the business owner in a small business. I'll show you later on a very quick and easy way to get the person whose signature belongs on this to actually sign a very bright white piece of paper with a high contrast pen, like a black or a blue pen. And there's a quick, easy, and free way to turn that image into an actual signature that we can insert into this document in Acrobat. That's a great thing to have. It saves you a lot of time. Sometimes in the instructions it will say specifically they want a wet signature on this document. It's becoming a lot rarer, but it does happen. A wet signature is where they physically sign the document, or there's an actual rubber stamp that you would stamp the document with that would look like a signature. Be aware that is something that happens sometimes, but it's not as common as it used to be, and if they don't specify, it's just fine to drop a file in here with an image of their signature. Beneath that would be the name and title of signer. That generally is going to be John Smith, CEO, and then the date signed, which should almost always be the deadline date to get the paperwork back into the government. As we said earlier, it is better to get this back in 24 hours ahead of time if possible. That's not always possible, but the date you put on here is going to be the deadline date. It's not going to be a date that you sent it if you did send it early. Let's move down. This would be ordinarily called the second page of Section A. Sometimes it's called Section B. Sometimes the price goes here, not always. It does not look like the price would go here, there. Below that, this would be additional stuff that would be filled out by the contracting officer once you won the actual award. It would include the amount that you won. This is Section B. It's also called Schedule. This is the pricing document. It would say in the instructions whether they wanted you to fill this in or to fill in an Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes they want you to do both. We're not going to worry about that level of detail at this point. Just be aware that this is where the price usually goes. And they would give you the data to go in here. You would never be responsible for coming up with it yourself. Here's a table of contents for the entire document. We can look at this very quickly. Section C is what we're about to look at because we're looking for boilerplate. D would be how to ship something. G, contract administration data. This is not something you ever need to worry about. Just be aware that this exists. H is special contract requirements. This can be things like the business owner can never have been convicted or couldn't have been convicted in the last 7 years of any kind of government procurement fraud, stuff like that. Contract clauses, sometimes this includes things like a Buy American Act, where if you're providing tangible goods, they have to have been produced in the United States and not imported from overseas and things like that. Keep going down. There's usually a lot of these things. Sometimes you have to actually go through and fill these in. We'll worry about that when we get to it. Section K is reps inserts. You almost always have to either return a Section K that you've prepared yourself or print the Section K out that we'll show you on SAM going forward. These are government legal terms that your company agrees to in a very specific way. Section L, instructions to offers, and that's usually followed by a Section M that tells you how the government will evaluate what it is you're sending in. I don't see a Section M here. You didn't get a Section M, so I guess it's just anybody's guess. It probably just says in Section L. So here we are down to Section C. This is what we opened the document to look at. This is usually either going to be termed the scope of work or the performance work statement. This is the government telling you what they expect the company to do or to provide in exchange for money. So this is very helpful because in whatever document you're working in, the section C for the opportunity that you're responding to, what we can do with a different section C from a similar project is when you're going through section L and you have instructions from the government that say reference section C for the specific scope of work, the government does not want you to simply regurgitate section C and give it back to us. And there's all sorts of different ways to say that, but basically what they're saying is don't copy and paste from the section C in the RFP that you're responding to into your document and give that back to the government and just say, we will do item A, we will do item B, we will do item C. That is not at all what they want, and you'll get a technical failure for doing something like that. It's never a good idea, even if they don't say that, because it lowers the government's confidence level that the company would actually be able to do the work if you can't provide any information other than this is what y'all said we need to do, we're going to do it. That's really not good enough for the government. They want you to be more specific. So if you're looking at the RFP that you're responding to and you've read the section L instructions, and then you go back to section C to see what it is they actually want you to do, and you're able to take that information and create an outline and have really great headers, well, now you have an outline, and how do you go back and fill it in without simply taking their information and just saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. Well, there's lots of ways to get that information, and what I'm showing you here is really not the best way in most cases to do it. This is an emergency way to do it. If you don't have any other data and you can't find anything and no one can give you anything and you don't know the field yourself, you might be able to come back here on FBO and find a similar RFP that was released previously and take their section C and take some information out of their section C and incorporate it in your RFP response. Again, this is just a brief intro. You don't have to worry about the deep logistics and specifics of this. We'll get into it again. I just want to show you that this is possible here in course 2. So we're looking at this section C. It has a title and everything. We come down a little bit. Here's a background paragraph that sort of tells you in a general sense what the project entails. This is excellent. They have it very well organized here. I love seeing things like this. This makes your life easier. So say, for example, in the RFP you're responding to, there's a section called customer service. Well, you could come here and say, well, Workstream 2 Customer Support Services probably has something to do with that. So let me just read over this very quickly and see if it seems to in some way respond to what I'm looking for, and just take the pieces that do. Something else is great. They have an unordered list here, a bulleted list. When you see bulleted lists, there's usually lots of things you can do with them if you're incorporating them in your writing. You can reuse it as a bulleted list. You can make it into an ordered list, like 1, 2, 3. You know, these things will happen in a logical sequence, and this is a sequence in which they will happen. Or you can do what Shipley says and make a visual out of it. And I'll just take a moment to tell you, when we're through looking at all these online resources in this course, we're going to turn our attention to some offline resources very briefly. One of them is Shipley. It's called Shipley Wins.